Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. This is the Bucky Inspired series, and I am delighted to have my friend Rupali Sharma presenting on the educational ideas of Maria Montessori and Buckminster Fuller. She's actually at her school, and I'm just going to hand it over to her. This is going to be, both presentation and demonstrations. So, Rupali, the floor is all yours.
Yes, I am really excited about this meetup, and I want to thank you, Shrikant, for letting me speak about it. I'm a Montessori teacher, and I'm also an architect. So for me, this is just amazing because it brings both my architecture skills as well as my educator hat, the two hats that I wear, it brings them together. So one of the things that Buckminster Fuller talked about was the universal principles that govern the world. And it doesn't matter which time period we live in, which place we live in, but those governing principles exist, and we function according to those governing principles. Well, Maria Montessori came to the same conclusion herself, and she came to those conclusions on her own. Now, just to give a perspective of where they were in their time frame, we talked about Louis Sullivan. Maria Montessori comes just she and Louis Sullivan were contemporaries in the sense that Louis Sullivan is older than her, and then you have Maria Montessori towards the tail end of his life. He knew about Maria Montessori and her work, and then Buckminster Fuller comes into the picture, and he knew about Maria Montessori and her work, and Maria Montessori knew about Buckminster Fuller and his work. And they both wrote things about each other's work in a very positive way. So I'm going to highlight today just how Buckminster Fuller thinks about the child and the education, how he thinks about humans as comprehensivists. And Maria Montessori takes the same approach that you have to understand who you are. You have the way you understand who you are is through nature around you, which is your environment. All animals, all human beings, they learn from their environment. And so, how do you learn from your environment? And how do you then take that learning and make it into something productive for humanity? So both Buckminster Fuller and Maria Montessori have the same goal. And I'm going to show a few materials that Maria Montessori uses to kind of show how you can teach comprehensive ideas, or how to teach a child to think comprehensively using the Montessori method. Now, just let me see. Give me 1 second. So this Buckminster Fuller, and you can see, I like this picture of Buckminster Fuller because you see all the things that he is creating with his own hands. And there's a strong approach to the hand-to-brain connection, right? One of the key ideas that Buckminster Fuller had was that if he could think, then he could make a difference in the world, and he could work towards advancement of humanity. And he came to this realization at the age of 32 that he could make a difference by thinking for himself. One of the things he says is that all human beings have that ability to think. He wasn't very special in that gift. He says every child is a genius. So if we can teach children how to think, not what to think, but how to think, then we have a hope for humanity. And one of the things he talks about is finding different ways to make things more accessible to a large number of people by, he came with, he understood this idea of abundance. Maria Montessori too, and in Louis Sullivan's Kindergarten Chats, we see that too, that nature has provided us with a lot of materials and abundance of resources, and we just have to take those resources and make them suitable for us and the world that we live in. And so by doing more with less, we can achieve that goal. So that's Buckminster's, and I'm just taking only a few ideas because Buckminster Fuller and Maria Montessori, they have a lot to offer. And for the purpose of today's conversation, I'm just going to focus on how to develop comprehensive thinking, how to go from concrete to abstract. Another day, another time, we can talk about some of their other ideas. So Maria Montessori, in her approach, in her observations of the world, she also came up with the same conclusions that, hey, there are these governing principles in the world, in the universe. You cannot change those. You have to live your life according to those principles. And by taking that reality and taking the human potential of imagination, how can you then make an impact in the world? So she talks about that in her lectures in London. So Maria Montessori spent 7 years in India, where she developed the elementary and middle school curriculum. And one of the things she did after returning to Europe was she started training teachers. And her lectures are called the London Lectures. She gave, I think, 32 or 33 lectures. And the key idea in that is that the child is the man, that the adult man, in the process of becoming the adult person. So one of the things she says is that we've always concentrated on civilization for adults. How does the child fit in? And if we are making the world for adults, when does that adult become an adult? That process really starts at birth. So she says there's no construction greater than that which makes humanity. So what does she mean by that? That you take a child at birth and you start right there. When the unconscious becomes the conscious, you start helping that child become the adult that the child is meant to be. So, one of the things that I really like about the fall when we plant bulbs is that the bulb has a potential. And we don't know in spring what's going to happen. But if you nurture that bulb, whether it's a tulip bulb or it's a daffodil, it comes with a lot of potential. Children are just like that at birth. They are full of potential. We don't know what they're going to be. It's a mystery that's going to unfold. And one of the things she talks about a lot in her lectures is that the traditional education system focuses on the defects of the child. Oh, you're not good at reading. You're not good at math. You're not good at this. You didn't score 100%. But what about the gifts? Every child has a gift. What if we just changed our perspective and focused on the gifts of the child and the strengths of the child and nurtured those strengths? That's going to take care of the challenges. And slowly, like a gardener would weed out or prune the twigs that are not necessary so that the plant or the flower can bloom. Similarly, the educator's role is to just weed out. It already is there. The child already has everything that child needs to become an adult. all we have to do is weed out all the wrong or the imperfections that may be, and then give the child a path to grow, remove the obstacles from their path. And so she says, man is a sculptor of himself, urged by a mysterious inner force to the attainment of an ideal determined form. And that form is going to show itself when the child grows to become an adult. So both Buckminster Fuller and Maria Montessori, they believe that you start from the whole. You start with the whole idea. And so then you go to the parts. The child then knows what are they learning this for? What is the purpose? They start right away at that. They are already inspired to learn. And so if, for example, they're learning about how did we come to be, right? And the teachers start with the picture of the universe. They start with the Big Bang. And there are many experiments that the child does, from the Big Bang to the formation of all the gases, and then the formation of galaxies and the solar system within that, then our planet within it, our country, where we are, our city, and then to the child itself. And so there is actually this nesting, these nesting boxes that the child can see, that look, right at 3 years of age, they can see, I am part of this big tower. I'm part of this big whole, that I'm not just me. And a lot between the ages of 3 to 6, everything is about the child. It's all about me, because the child is learning to develop their fine motor skills, gross motor skills. But then when the child goes from 7 to 12 years, they start seeing, how do I fit in within this community of my classroom, or my family, or my extended family, and the people around me? So that's why Maria Montessori starts with from whole to the parts. And in other Buckminster Fuller meetups, we've talked about synergetics, where Bucky talks about the importance of starting with the whole and then the part. So I'm not going into that today. Both Buckminster Fuller and Maria Montessori believe in the child's potential. So they both believe that every child is capable. Now, if you allow the child the freedom to choose, the freedom to think, they will invariably arrive at conclusions that will help them propel forward. If the teacher is constantly telling, and the teacher or the adult is constantly interfering, then the child is turned off. They really don't want to study. And I'd like all of us to kind of think about our own education system. How did you feel during that time? And were you being told? Did you have the liberty to think? And how has that shaped you? So both believed in the greatness of man, that humans can achieve greatness. And if we look at where we are today, it is a combined effort of humanity before us. So both Maria Montessori and Buckminster Fuller have written a lot about the human potential and the greatness of man. So throughout history, humans have taken the ability to think, taken the tools in nature that are available, the resources in nature, they've created tools, and they've built civilizations. They've also destroyed civilizations. And so we have this potential to do good. We also have the potential to hurt each other and inflict harm on each other. So what does it really mean to be human? Is there a moral basis also? Both Maria Montessori and Bucky talk about the importance of knowing what's right, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, so that you're always working towards benefiting humanity. And then how So if we have this potential, how can we develop that potential? So Maria Montessori, if we look at her idea of an adult, what is the whole being? What is an ideal adult like? So according to her, she believes that a person who knows moral values, has an understanding of what's right, what's wrong, is at peace, um, and knows who that person is. Who am I? This is the biggest question in the elementary years that a child works on: is who am I? How do I fit in? What is my purpose? It's part of the curriculum. And by middle school, by the time they're adolescents, there's a big emphasis on valorization of the child, and how can I contribute to the community that I am in? And whether it's their family, whether it's the school community, whether it's a local community or a global community, how do I participate in that? So this child should be able to focus and think purposefully and solve problems. This person or this adult can communicate and collaborate. Both Buckminster Fuller and Maria Montessori talk a lot about communication skills. Language is a big part of how we work with each other. And if you can't communicate your ideas, then you can't move ahead with a large group of people. And so whether those communication tools are in speaking, reading, listening, writing, digital tools, whatever tools, those are the various ways this human being can communicate, and then works not only to meet their own needs, but also makes an impact in the community. And even young children, as young as kindergarten students, can make that impact in the community. We are part of a church, and we rent space in a church, and our students in the fall, they plant tulips, and they're young children, kindergarten students. And yet, in the spring, it's beautiful, it's their work, and they've made an impact by doing something more than just taking care of themselves. So Buckminster Fuller, his biggest contribution was teaching people. I mean, so many contributions, but one of the contributions that how I got to get to know Buckminster Fuller's work was through the system of building domes, geodesic domes. So he came up with this idea that any human being anywhere in the world can build. I'm not going to show this today, but another day we'll talk about how kindergarten students build domes with just newspaper and tape. And our adolescent students build geodesic domes with logs of wood and rope. So the material may change, but the idea is very simple and easily accessible for anybody anywhere in the world. Similarly, Maria Montessori came up with this education system that any person anywhere in the world can apply. You can do it at home, you can do it at school, you can do it in a community. So many Montessori schools start in the basements of churches or in small areas. You don't really need a lot. The way Maria Montessori designed her education system was based on the planes of development, her observations about children. So now we are saying, okay, if we want the adult to have all these skills, to be able to think and be purposeful, know who this person is, have a goal in life, be able to make contributions, what do we need to do from birth? And so that construction starts at birth. And as adults, as educators, as parents or caregivers, what is our role? So from 0 to 6 years, the child's desire is to know the world, and it's very, very sensory. Any child at that age is putting things in their mouth, is crawling, is learning to walk with stability, is heavily dependent on the adults, is slowly learning to build independence, and there's an explosion of language around 2 years of age. And so for 2 years, a child doesn't talk, is not able to speak. But for 2 years, the child is taking in all that information and is listening very attentively. If you look at an infant and and if the mother is talking to them or the father, any adult is talking to them, they look at their lips with intensity. They're gathering all that information. Something's happening in the brain and they're making sense of it, that they can respond to their name, they can respond to certain directions. And before they're even 2 years old, they are communicating with gestures or through babbling what they want. By 2 years, there's a sudden explosion of language and they can speak, and they can speak in complete sentences. By 3 years, I have a grandniece who is 3 years old, and she tells us stories. She sometimes tells us stories that are scary. And so she has this imagination that she can develop things. So it doesn't matter whether the child is speaking Hindi, Marathi, French, German, English, Russian. It doesn't matter which part of the world they are in. It is universal. This growth, this developmental stage is universal. When they are by 6 years old, they know how to do most of the things independently in terms of eating, walking, running, managing themselves, dressing themselves. Then comes the next stage, 7 to 12 years, where they are now becoming part of society, now fitting into their community. And they, as I said, their imagination is really soaring. It's important at this age to give them a large amount of ideas so they can take those ideas and run with their imagination, whether they're doing poetry or music, drama, art, drawing, math, language, history, geography. You give them a vast curriculum to develop that. They're striving to become independent by 9 years, 10 years old. They want to do things by themselves. They don't want the adult to do things for them. And so they're slowly getting to the part where they can contribute. So leadership comes into play. The other part, from 12 to 18 years, now they're becoming adolescents. They know their reading, writing, math, history, geography, science. They know their grammar. They have the toolbox necessary to actually perform things in the community. So now it's not who am I? They are, and I want to emphasize on this, who am I? This knowing themselves between the ages of 7 to 12 is such an important part of having a stable, anchored human adult. Because if they don't have it, it's really now or never. The sense of morality, the sense of my place in the community, my comfort, how I communicate with others, all really happens within that age group. Once they are stable and are comfortable in their own skin, they can then participate in the community. Because in the adolescent years, it's all about, where am I going with this? This is who I am. How do I fit in with my peers? How do I fit in with others? And the children at that age are strong, they're healthy, they have the desire to work with others. And so giving them an environment where they can roam around freely. And Maria Montessori's idea was to let children work on a farm at this age, that they are away from their parents for a few months or few days even, so that they can be independent. And the parents and adults are still there guiding them, but they're not doing everything for them. So here is the time when children can participate in maybe community projects, taking a problem and solving it in the community. This is something Buckminster Fuller talks. What do you want to do with your life? He says, well, look around you. Is there a problem to solve? Think about the problem. go ahead, solve it, create something, create a solution. And that's precisely what Maria Montessori talks about in the adolescent years. And then finally, you come to the adulthood, where the child is independent, has matured, and is now a functioning member of the society. And that's because of the work they've done in the adolescent years. That's because they were comfortable in the 7 to 12 elementary years, where they were comfortable being who they are. And so important to focus on the strengths of the child at that age, because that's going to, in adulthood, help them say, I am good at speaking, I'm good at writing, or I'm good at poetry. You don't have to be one the same thing. You don't have to be good at everything, but you could just focus on your strengths. They have immense ability to do physical and mental work. And some of us are in that stage, some of us are beyond that stage. If we are parents, we see our children as adults, and they can, if they have all the skills that they need by the age of, by the time they graduate from college, by the age of 20, then they are ready to really participate in the world. So that's how Maria Montessori and Buckminster Fuller kind of work together in their idea of human development. And this is Maria Montessori's observations of planes of development. So how can the child then be of help to civilization? Because Maria Montessori says, if you want to advance humanity, you have to look at the child. And what skills do we need to teach the child? Now, the very first thing she says is respect the child. The child is not just somebody who needs to be quiet and just be, invisible, but the child has a presence. Respect that, honor that. And if you respect the child is watching that behavior and is developing their own character. And so through many, many experiences, you can develop the whole child. So at this point, I'm going to pause here, and I'm actually going to show some of the Montessori materials to show how a child who is 3 years old, you see this child is just building with blocks. Now, these blocks are not just any blocks. Maria Montessori really thought through this. The smallest block is 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. So it's a cube of 1 centimeter. And the largest block is 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter. So it's a cube of 10 centimeters. And the child at this age, at 3-year-old, is just arranging the blocks by size. They first see, oh, here's the smallest block, here's the largest block, here's the variation. All right, now within this, I'm going to compare. So now they're comparing those blocks and placing the blocks according to size. So they're not just building a tower. They are thinking about the shape. The child actually feels these things in their hand. So there's this hand to brain connection. They can actually visualize what is 1 centimeter cube, what is a 10 centimeter cube. 1 centimeter cube is very light. This is very heavy. So now they're developing even the vocabulary to describe. So now language is developing with geometry, with math, and everything. The child is putting the whole picture together. I think in one of the talks, Maritza talked about how you can describe an elephant, and you need to see the whole and not just its parts, right? So by doing this kind of work, the child is seeing the whole spectrum, the whole gamut, whether it's music. Even when they learn music in the Montessori classroom, there are specialized bells that they can actually sound, and they can see the whole gamut of the octave. And they can then place from the lowest to the highest, or according to the scale, they can place the sound. So it's not just math, it's also music. It's also art. They have color tablets, so they can go from the lightest shade to the darkest shade. There's temperature, so you can see from coldest to the warmest. You can also do from rough to smooth. You can do textures. So there's just this amazing amount of variety that's presented to the child that the child can sensorially absorb. And Buckminster Fuller talks about this, that most of the things in the universe we absorb we understand through our senses. So whether it's through smell or sight or hearing or tasting or feeling, we are taking all that information in through our senses, forming our ideas about them in our brain, and then we produce something based on our understanding of that reality. So Maria Montessori, in the 3 to 6 years of age, for a child, spends a lot of time on giving that sensorial input. It's called the practical life and sensorial. So the child's senses are always activated the very first thing when they enter the classroom. So behind me actually is the sensorial and practical life area in the classroom. And so when a child enters, it's something familiar, that's a extension of the home. And so it's not like, oh, where am I? Is this place is different from my home? No, it's called a children's house. It is similar to your home because the home and the classroom, the school have to work together for the child to become a whole being. And so that's the sensorial. Now, what happens when the child gets older? So I'm going to stop share here. I'm going to turn on my camera to show some of the math material, how geometry, math, and language go from taking the input through senses and then making it into abstract, because Buckminster Fuller talks about there are things in the world that you cannot see or cannot hear, but they exist. And how do you take those abstract ideas and make them real? So we'll pause here.
Right. So Rupali will be turning on her other camera to show you all the materials. Should be back within a minute or two. So she's going to do a demonstration and then would love to hear everybody's comments. Any comments, any questions would be welcome. So over to Rupali. Rupali, go ahead.
Yeah. So I have over here in front of me these geometric solids.
Just a second, Rupali. It is not sure. Give me just a second. Hold on. I'm going to spotlight this one. Okay, there. Off.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Give me just a second. Let me just make sure that folks, can you see what Rupali is showing? Okay, very good. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So these are geometric solids. They're really beautiful. And you can see that, they're, for a child, it's a shiny object. They can feel it, they can touch it. And the teacher will say, this is a sphere. This is an ovoid. It has a flatter base and a more pointed top. This is an ellipsoid. And you can see the ellipsoid. Here is a cylinder. Here is a cone. I'll start with a cube. And a pyramid, a square-based pyramid, a triangle-based pyramid, a prism, and a rectangular prism. And they can see these And the teacher will put them in a mystery bag so that the child just has to grab in the bag and they can feel it and they can say, oh, it's a sphere. And they may feel the ovoid and they might say it's an ovoid. And through game, by making it a game, children learn what these shapes are. And they start with basically the geometric solids. And from geometric solids, they go into plane geometry and they learn about the surfaces of these shapes. They might take the square or the triangle and they start looking at these shapes in more detail. And there's a material called the metal inset wood. I'm just going to get that. And so you can see these shapes now. The children can, at a very young age, they can identify the shapes and they can tell you the names of all of these shapes. And the teacher will go through the shapes as, here is a trapezoid. And they can see the inset. So they can see both the shape and the inset. Here is a quatrefoil. Where have you seen this? Sometimes they'll go outside and they look at the hydrangeas in the garden and they say, oh, there's a quatrefoil. So they see that this is real. And then, as I said before, we are in a church. So one of the windows is a quatrefoil outside. How about this? Look, this looks like the triangle. But it's a curvilinear triangle. So they're not just learning circle, square, triangle, they're also learning the curved shapes. And then a child may take the book, take these shapes and make something with them by combining the shapes. So here you can see this child has taken the quatrefoil and has turned it twice. So this is the child's experimentation. Now this helps them develop handwriting. It helps them because the child is going left to right, top to bottom. They're learning how to develop their penmanship and their handwriting. So now here you see the child has taken the triangle and turned it upside down. Here is the ellipse. And then just moved it again. Here's a quatrefoil within a square. Here's the curvilinear triangle. Turned twice. So it says two curvilinear triangles. And here is the trapezoid in the square. And here's the pentagon. And then after the child makes these shapes, they have the freedom to choose any shape they want. They have the freedom to color them the way they want. So this is a lot of experimentation that the child does. And the child is doing this quietly, developing their own thought, making their own connections in their brain. And then at the end of it, they sew the book. So they learn how to sew so they can see that it's their own handmade book. They learn the process of how books are made. And such a simple activity, but it covers a lot of skills. So that's Now, this is all very concrete in the ages of 3 to 6. This is very concrete work. They would take, and today I'm just going to focus on math and geometry. Once they know these shapes, they'll take out the triangle box, and the triangle box just has triangles. When Tom was doing his presentation, I just loved it because his entire website looks like this. And the child learns to organize their work. Two more triangles. Right angle triangles. And the teacher then will proceed to give a very silent presentation for this work. See this black line? It's magical. See this black line? I'm going to watch them, just watch them. Look, we made a parallelogram from two right angle triangles. Here's another right angle triangle. We're going to take the diagonal. Two right angle triangles make a square. And so on and so forth. The teachers do it very quietly and slowly so that it's impressionable for the child. I'm just going to make these shapes, and you can see by just connecting triangles, I'm making all these shapes. Two scalene right angle triangles. And the teacher will say, just like you have a first name and a last name, the triangles have a first name and a last name, and so on and so forth. So they make it into a game, and you can see the variety. These two triangles are the same, but if I connect them, I can get a rectangle or I can get a parallelogram. The area is the same. So when they study area and perimeter in elementary years, the work that they've done in their 3 to 6 years just playing with triangles, it becomes very easy for them to say, oh, I'm just taking out this portion and putting it here to make it the area. And what if I connect this triangle over here? Look, with a trapezoid and with a trapezium and an equilateral triangle, I can make another triangle. And here's a larger parallelogram. So children can play with this. There are different triangle boxes. So what this does for the child is it just helps them develop an understanding of geometry. And they can then draw these, they can cut out the shapes, they can stick the shapes with construction paper, they can make it their own by playing with these shapes. And suddenly an abstract concept like what is a parallelogram? They know it. They know it when they're 3 and 4 years old. Their vocabulary is increasing. They can communicate better. Now, here is another tool that I'm going to show. On the surface, this is just a square. But when the child opens it, inside, they see the same pattern. This is called the binomial cube. And you can see that it's binomial is because there's one cube and there is another cube. So it is a binomial cube. There are two cubes. And a 3, 4, 5-year-old child is just playing with this material as blocks. They're just building them. And they start with the largest cube. There's a red surface and a black surface. So I'm going to take a red and a black. It's self-explanatory. The child does not need an adult to tell them what to do because it is self-explanatory. Here, there's a black and a red surface. So I'm going to take a black and a red. And here there's a blue and a black. So I'm going to take the blue and the black. And there we are. We've made the base. I'm going to start again with the red. Here's a black and a black. I'm going to match the black to the black, black to the black. And here's the blue cube. And if I put it on top, I get the binomial cube. So for a young child, and similarly, we have a trinomial cube, 3 numbers, 3 cubes. There's a A, B, and C cube. So similarly, the trinomial cube also, you can see there are 3 cubes, 3 squares. So for a child who's playing with this material, they can do this blindfolded. So by the time they are 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, they can build these cubes blindfolded. What does it do to their cognition? They can actually feel these numbers in their hands. This is not just a blue cube. Let's give it a name. Maybe we'll call it A. This is A cubed. This is A square. We can see it's a square. This is A, and if we call the red B, it's A times B. And let's give this cube a name, B cube. So I'm just going very fast. So for a 3 to 6 year old, they're just building these blocks as a puzzle. For a 7 to 12-year-old, they're looking at this more abstractly. It was a concrete thing, and they're saying, oh, let's give it a name. Let's call this A, let's call this B. What shape is this? This is a square. What shape is this? Oh, this is a square. This is another square. A square, B square. Well, what are these black things? It's A times B. So A square plus B square plus 2AB. What do we have then? We have our equation that we know for polynomials. A square plus B square plus 2AB. And that's what we have for our, let me see, orientation, right? That's what we have. And now it's not very scary all of a sudden. Polynomials are not scary to children. They can do it when they're 7 and 8 years old. Well, even before this, when they were 3 and 4 year old, they were counting these chains This is the chain of 4. I know that because there are 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, 12, 16. What happens if we fold this? What shape did I get? It's a square. It's a 4 square. 4 square is 16. And so I have 16 makes a square. What if I put all these squares together? If I put a 4 square and a 4 square and a 4 square, I get a 4 cube. And this is so beautiful. The children love. We talked about sensory input. Nowadays, there's so many cases where children have sensory deprivation and they have to go for remedial work by the time they are 8 and 10 years old because they haven't had sensory input. But what Montessori does is it allows children to have that sensory input. And so there's a big part of the brain that is developing by just touching and playing with these are glass beads. And they feel so good. It's not just plastic. These are wooden blocks. There's weight to them. They can feel it. When they carry these from the shelves, they can feel the weight of these materials. So now let's look at this with this problem. Let's look at the square of 9. This is a 9 square. 9 square, I can have 2 squares, right? I could put a 5 square there. I could put a 4 square there. That would make it a 9 square. So 9 can be made with 4 and so I'm really jumping through a lot of stages. Children have learned addition, subtraction, multiplication, all of that. But here's one way of looking at squares. So what do you think is over here? I can see it's 5 times 4 and it's 4 times 5. In a very sensorial manner, using all their senses, children can learn that a plus b, the whole thing squared, is a square plus b square plus 2ab. So 9 square. Now I can say to the child, all right, what is 4 square? I could use 1 square, 3 square, I could use 2 square and 2 square. What about 6 square? What are the combinations of 6? 1 and 5, 4 and 2, 3 and 3. I could do 8 square. Well, what about 13 square? We don't have materials for a 13 square. But the child can just imagine. This is where imagination takes leap in connecting the concrete material to the abstract idea. And they don't need to learn this formula. They don't need to memorize this. How many of us memorize this in elementary or middle school? Montessori children don't have to. They can figure it out because they can think through the problem. So now they can easily calculate the square of a number. They can now go in a reverse manner and calculate the square root. So that's the beauty of taking a concrete material, something they can see, touch, feel, they can hear it, they can talk to their friends about it, they can work with another friend and say, hey, how about, and it's amazing to see once they make this discovery that a square of a number is nothing, but you can divide it into 2 squares. What if I divide it into 3 squares? Could I do 3 squares? What if I had maybe 15? I could do 3 squares. Well, Could we do 4? Could we do 5? And suddenly there's an explosion into polynomials, and they are just 8 or 9 years old. Because the material is there, they can make that leap into abstraction. So now we can say, all right, that's on the surface. They have used, remember we talked about geometric solids first? They've seen this since they were an infant. They've carried these from one place to another place because they were learning to walk and balance themselves. The teacher would have given them this block in a tray to carry. They know this as a dear, dear friend. I really enjoyed when Stroopy would talk to his structures. That's what children do. They talk, these are their friends. They know them intimately. And they can say very easily, how many surfaces does a cube have? They've touched it so many times, they can say it right away, 6. How many vertices? How many sides? So then when we say, this is a cube, we've just talked about the surface, about how to calculate the surface of the cube, of this one side. And so now they have all these lovely squares to play with and build either the square of a number or they can build a cube of a number. And so by the time they are in 5th grade, 6th grade, they can do polynomials very easily. So they can take a very abstract idea in algebra and from infancy work towards it little by little by little. And that is the beauty of Maria Montessori's work. So I will pause here. There's just a lot of material to show, but I'm going to just pause here. And see if there were any questions. This is one material. Now we can, Maria Montessori designed many materials like this in language to teach children sentence structure, grammar, punctuation, history, geography, science. How does it connect to Bucky and comprehensive thinking? I just want to say that a child who can understand a concept with their senses and can internalize that concept, use their imagination to create their own iterations of that idea, that is the leap they make. And it is a very integrated way of learning because they're not just doing this in math lesson. They're not doing this in a language lesson. They're doing it in their own uninterrupted work time, which is they're developing language skills, they're developing writing skills, they're developing mathematical skills, they're playing with it, they're learning geometry, they're coloring, so they're learning art skills. All of it is integrated. And then the teacher will often talk about Euclid, or they'll talk about Eratosthenes, or they might talk about, and do you know, Ptolemy used this to do that. And so they're learning about great people and great ideas through the stories that the teacher's teaching them or telling them while they're doing this work. And so it's an integrated way of learning. And through this way, you can teach a child to become a comprehensivist at a very young age. You don't have to wait till you're an adult. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And I just wanted to point out that even for mathematics, Maria Montessori has a lot of material, and Rupali had to kind of pick and choose to give you a sample of what kind of a thing that is being done. Would love to hear your comments or questions. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. We'll start with Richard. Richard, go ahead.
Thank you. It was a very sensorial presentation and an appreciation of how one can learn through seeing and doing and feeling and that sort of thing. What came across to me, which is kind of interesting and exciting in many ways, is the my sensorial feelings of what was happening vis-a-vis being a comprehensivist and so forth. And so I'll just put this out and for your thoughts and comments. What I saw was what, at this point anyway, would be teaching man's way of understanding geometric solids and building blocks and the cubing and so forth, all the way down to the mention of Euclid. What my mind was doing in the context of Fuller's ideas of unity is not oneness, unity is plural, minimum two, I was relating to the parallel of the wireframe versions of all of these. And going down through into triangling, if you want, versus squaring, and all the way down to nature's way of doing something versus man's way of doing something. And so I ended up with a parallel of man's way and nature's way. And what I was coming to my mind was the idea that the comprehensivist that Fuller is talking about is a mix of man's way and nature's way. And if we can actually see them crisscrossing, weaving back and forth, we add another element to the learning that is very capable in a young child. So I just throw that out. It really just struck me. And I think probably a lot of this has been influenced by my own looking at the wireframe version of all the solids and some of what Struppi has presented in terms of his spherical wireframe version of the solid. So I share that just for the your feedback and comment. My own excitement of having a better understanding of the solid approach and the wireframe, and instead of getting trapped into the binary of one is better than the other, I realize the comprehensivist knows both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It's
that's a great observation. And I think both Bucky and Maria Montessori talk about taking what is in the natural world and interpreting it in our own way, and then creating something that is in harmony with nature. I just want to show something else. So we talked about, how children take these ideas. Now they can, older children, so in kindergarten, they start with origami and they make very simple shapes. They'll make a dog and a fish and turtle and swan. By third grade, they're making more intricate, solid shapes. And they can see the same things that they had in their childhood, that they can now create it themselves. And they can experiment with this. And this is the two children worked on this, 4th and 5th graders. And here's something that they made using origami. And there are so many triangles and parallelograms. And this is their own creation from something they saw and built. And then another child who was more artistic, and she couldn't just do the geometric shapes. She made these little biomes. So this is, let me see, I think there's like a glare on it, but this is an origami spring and summer and fall and winter. But the same idea, the idea that a child can think. And so when they have the freedom to think, it's just amazing the amount of creation that exists. And there's no limit really. And you have to allow children that freedom. So, and Montessori allows that. Maria Montessori does that in her education model.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, I really like nature's way and man's way. So here is an example of nature. Yes, the spring and summer, and here is the man's interpretation. Or this is a girl actually. So here's a girl's interpretation of nature in her own way.
Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. Thank you, Richard. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark to make comments or ask questions. Next up is Jeannie. Jeannie, go ahead.
Okay. I really loved your presentation, and I wish I had gone to a Montessori when I was a kid, because this is really the kind of thing that I relate to myself. But I'm wondering, I mean, you kind of touched upon a kid has to develop a certain respect for objects. You know, this is there's a lot of artifacts in this way of teaching. And you kind of touched upon it, you know, the kid is carrying around a cube. So I guess it comes gradually, you know, but what do you do for the kids that do not respect artifacts, you know, or just want to leave all these things scattered all around or possibly destroy them? I mean, I know, you know, if I had a set like that, even when I was a kid, I'm sure I would have started cutting things up. And you know, it's safe in the school because you're not allowed to, you know, just go in there. But, you know, how do kids develop that respect for the toy or the object? And the other thing I wanted to bring in that's sort of related is I see so many toys in the trash. So these things, I see that you introduce them to the kid at various ages and they get a different thing out of them. But for many kids, they have something and after about a week, they're totally bored with it. And, you know, if you're lucky, your parent is, you know, taking that to the thrift shop and some other kid is benefiting. But so many toys are just made and thrown away year by year. You see them, you know, around Christmas time, just stacks of them out in the garbage. So yeah. How can you create an environment for kids with a lot of these artifacts, because I think they are important, without just making huge amounts of garbage for the society?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I would, you know, the materials I'm showing you are more than 7 years old, and they still look shiny because children handle them with a lot of care and respect. And
I think there is internet issue, but it will be resolved in a minute. I think we had an interruption before. So I'm going to try to answer that question. There are two parts to it. I think, Jeannie, fantastic question. One is that how do you develop that respect within a child? That's one question. And secondly, what about this disposable toy culture that we have? Okay, and I'll take the second one first. What Maria Montessori has done, you know, I recommend everybody to actually go to a Montessori school, because it is something really remarkable, something very different from a normal school. And you walk in the entire side, all the walls, they have shelves, all of which are accessible by kids, and they are full of these Montessori materials. So they're not really toys, they are materials. So they are very carefully designed by Maria Montessori to develop different abilities that the child needs to develop at a particular age, between 3 to 6. Let's look at the first kind of core of the Montessori, which is 3 to 6 year old. And what they have done is that, what she has done is that she has created a whole range of materials which will enable child to develop the abilities that they develop during that time. So those are very, there's tremendous amount of choice. Unfortunately, most toys that are designed are designed to appeal to emotions of the child for the moment. And that's the reason why they go out of fashion very, 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 very fast. What this is that this is material for that particular age group. So you have 20 kids in the classrooms, and it's actually really amazing to see a Montessori classroom, a good Montessori classroom. When you walk into a Montessori classroom and you watch kids arrive, they're almost like business folks. They know exactly what they're going to do, what their plan is. They will go directly to the material. They're very, very disciplined because all the material is on the side and the middle room is all empty. What they have is they have these little mats. So whenever they want to work on something, they have a process. You put the mat down, you bring whatever you want to work on to your mat, you work on it. When you're done, you put the thing back, you roll up the mat and put it aside. Then you go to the next thing. And that you can do for yourself, or you can work with it together. And they learn this very, very early. Rupali is still away. Rupali, are you back?
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay. Sorry, I was answering the question. Let me just finish this, and then I'll hand it over to you. Okay, so the interesting thing, so there are two parts of it. The material is designed conceptually based on what facilities need to be developed. Secondly, nobody tells the child what they should play with, what they should work with. The child decides, and they choose things, and it is calibrated. All the material is calibrated. So for example, let's say the sensorial things, you have blocks. Let's take a simple thing where you're picking up a block and putting it in these slots, which are designed for different shapes. Now they have big blocks, medium-sized blocks, and very small blocks. Depending on the dexterity of their hands, they choose the level which is challenging for them. Not boring because it was too easy, not frustrating because it is impossible for them to do, but just the right level. So all of it is graded, all of it is available. When they are done with one, they just go to the other. At each classroom, there are 3 different years of kids. So some are working on this, some are working on that, some are working on something else. In addition to that, the older kids, when they master something, actually teach the younger kids. Younger kids, they work with the younger kids to do that. So it's even that social angle is brought in. So all the materials are used. So for example, a typical Montessori classroom you walk into, everything has been there for 10 years. And something like 20 kids over 10 years, so 200 kids have used it, and probably another 200 kids will use it over time. And that's the beauty of kind of designing something which is based on human needs instead of just to get a rise out of people. So somebody will pay something and so that their kid can play with it for a day or two. So that was but I'm going to hand it to Rupali. Rupali, sorry, I stepped in because you cut out for some time. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry about the connection. Anyways, I want to share that first, what you said is absolutely right. The other thing is that in a Montessori classroom, children actually have ownership in what they do. So the teachers don't make the rules. They have community meetings at the beginning of the year, and they come up with rules for how to. So it's like a charter or a constitution. So they make their own class constitution. And the great thing is, because I'm in the classroom, I can just get up and go get it. So this is a class constitution that the children have designed themselves. And then they make the rules, they this is a living document that stays on the wall, and they follow them. So treat others, the class constitution is treat others how you want to be treated. This is from kindergarten to grade 3. Respect others and be kind. Respect the environment. Be safe. Be patient. Listen when spoken. Be independent. Make decisions together. Make your best effort. Be curious. Do the right thing even when no one is looking, and be happy. So this is that class constitution. These are rules that the children have come up with. So when there's a conflict, when somebody is not handling materials properly, children are going to be children. The teacher will say, are you respecting the environment? And then the child has to just think. And when you ask, the child will respond. And, of course, they're going to have days when they're not happy or things like that. But you can see the teacher will say, well, if we drop this, it's going to chip. And you have to teach the children what happens if they throw a tantrum. As the children get older, in the older age group, for penmanship, they actually write quotes. So they have these quotes from great leaders that they copy. So here's from Confucius: wherever you go, go with all your heart. And so these are just cards that are in the classroom that the teachers have made. And speak your truth quietly and clearly. Listen to others, even to the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. This is from Desiderata, Max Ehrmann. And so they just, for penmanship, they'll copy this quote, and for penmanship, they write an essay about what the quote means. So now the teacher's not telling them, but this is the wisdom that's passed on from generations that they can just take. Here's one from Thomas Jefferson: the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And so now they're meeting all these great people throughout history through their work that they are doing in the classroom. And because they have to write an essay about what it means, they have to go do some research. They might read a book, they might write about it, and then it becomes a part of them. They don't need an adult telling them this is not right or that is not right, because you've given them the opportunity to think for themselves. So that's how they learn to respect the environment and respect the materials. There are natural consequences. Teachers often will have natural consequences because they are learning. And so when I talked about pruning and weeding, this is the pruning and weeding, is they will use the materials in the classroom to help the child think about their behavior. And Shrikant, you did a fantastic job about talking how carefully the materials are designed. And I really like the fact you call them, Jeannie, you call them artifacts, because they truly are Montessori artifacts that are there for children to use. And what happens with our students is once they've finished using that particular set of artifacts, they create their own as an extension. So they'll say, oh, I went through all the maths, the algebra materials, and I need to do something more. Okay, we don't have the material in the classroom. Can I design my own material? And yes, the teacher will give them anything they need to design their own materials. And so we in our classrooms have materials designed by our alumnus who have created their own materials for grammar, math, geometry, you name it. We ran out of money books, and so they created money extensions to understand money. So the idea is that a child can think, and you give them the freedom and the resources, and they will create. They'll make their own artifacts at a very young age.
Thank you, Rupali. Jeannie, just one last comment. It's really remarkable, this Montessori materials, because when you actually experience it, it feels like the idea of ephemeralization. It's like everything that you see, everything that is designed there, it is carefully designed to have these hundreds of kids use it to develop their faculties. So only those things which will enable this entire group of people learn over this time, only those things are there and nothing else is there. So it's like that. So the level of standard for what is there in the classroom is very high based on the material. So it's something really remarkable. And in some ways it is very sad to see the toys, because it's a really insult to what a child is, most toys, because they are just trying to, make, just distract the child for a moment. Whereas these materials are really designed to build the child towards an adult, and everything is thought of in that way. Great question, Jeannie. Thank you so much. Next up is Shruti.
Aha. Hi. Well, thank you, Rupali, for both your overview over the minds behind the ways that you're using, and also the little insight into the material at play. And yeah, I'm it's touching a few notes in me, because on one hand, it reminds me of my childhood insofar as the kindergarten that I went to, which was one that my parents or my mother rather, created together with other parents. It was just after the political shift in East Germany. Eastern Germany was gone, and they went together with a bunch of other people into this former secret police kind of building, threw all the shit out, and then making a Diakoniewerk, so I don't know, like a place of care for people with all kinds of different abilities and disabled, so-called people. People with disabilities. And my parents were drawn into that because my sister, one of my sisters, my older one, was born with different abilities. And they created all these things in this time of shift and change where nothing was set in stone. And the kindergarten was an integrative kindergarten, which I think was quite special at the time. And I grew up with all these kids, and there was no normal among them. We were all kinds of funky. And the setting of the kindergarten itself was very much populated with a lot of these materials. So I actually remember them from back then, now that I see them again. And at the same time, my personal life was also complemented by my father's side, who was, in the same place creating, like he had a workshop for adult people with disabilities where they were weaving and spinning thread and drawing and working with wood and working with clay, all this stuff. And after kindergarten I would just go there and play on. So I think I got a lot of mix of this. And then later on, after a few other schools, I also got into a Steiner school, and that was where I basically had most of my school time. So in that regard, I'm somewhat intimately familiar with lots of these things. And something strange happened just as you showed these, because I am not myself anymore that I was back then, right? I have grown familiar with spherical thinking and with synergetics and with Bucky's perspective on things. And there was a moment in your slides when you asked this question of how can the child contribute to civilization, right? And this is a word that, usually we have a very positive connotation to. I don't anymore, I've learned too much about what civilization so often entails that I am having a hard time, thinking of it as something that is innately good just for being civilization. And I see the picture accommodating that with the kid stacking the cubes, and from that point on, like most of those materials that you were sharing with us, from the paper to the boxes that they come in, to all, the room, the house, the everything, the furniture is pre-conceptualized within a frame of mind that is clearly stemming from this ancient Greek flavor of geometry, right? Where it is about the solids, where it is about the cubes and the squares and all of these things. And my kind of, what I'm playing with now, I grew back into a child. I don't think I ever grew fully adult. So it wasn't a long way back, but now I'm growing these kinds of things every single day, as I'm doing right now, these kinds of things. And this is wooden beads and cotton string in this case. And most of the things that I do with these are, they are alive in a way that those materials aren't. And I can tell you, if this was to be handed down through generations of kids, it wouldn't take long to break, but it also wouldn't take long to repair. And I think that's a lesson that the kids would learn very quickly if they were to be familiarized with these ways, is that not only is the amount of options of choice of shape and expression vastly more abundant if the material is not preconceived within the square, it is also both more fragile and more resilient, right? Like these structures here, like the other day I created this because I needed a new bag for my big box that I made for my instruments. And this is essentially half an 8-ice as a shape, right? This is the shape that Tom Miller was into. And this is, the whole thing is a tensegrity. It doesn't look like those that were popularized by Bucky, but it is a tensegrity, and it's also sort of a double membrane, like in a cell organelle, So there's lots and lots of relationships at play here that I can tell from my heart that if I was told about these things when I was a little one, I would never have dreamed about playing with Lego. I would not have used any of those blocks that I was handed because I could have been doing this. And I, in my adolescence, it was when the computers came up, and, recently Kirby was speaking here, and I was just curious how to, integrate Montessori and his kind of digital. There's like a big block in the way of how can we, how do we get the block away so that we can give way to, why does it need to be man outside of nature if we can be humanimals within kinship earth, right? Why do our ways continue to need to be differentiated from those of universe? And I know it's a long way, because these things, as clear as they become to be to me, I clearly see that they aren't to everyone else. Most of the time, I like, if I were to show you the big stash of hexagonal papers, just papers that are cut in hexagons. They could have created them in hexes, but that's not a thing. So I have to get those that are cut, or cut them myself, or make them myself. But I've got books now that are that shape because I cut off the corners. I've got stacks of paper, and I've never been as creative with paper as with those pages, right? Like just today I was playing with this as a bookmark, so I should keep the page, but this is just 3 such papers and I folded them as you were talking about the origami, right? And I figured out a way to fold these so that they would make something that I hadn't before, while they can also be an 8-eyes just out of nowhere. And you know, like the potential of creativity and imagination and all of these things, as much as Montessori's way was ahead of its time in terms of weaving back some of the sensorial and the, you know, integrating cognitive and sensorial and all of these things, and the social by that, you know, the way that the little ones are able to learn from the bigger ones and vice versa. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm just curious, you know, from my point of view, how would all of this material behave and look if we were just shifting the frame of mind? Like you were showing those little beads the glass beads, right? Yes, they can make a square of 16, but if they are all like closest drawn, you know, that little shift from parallel to whoop to triangulation, suddenly they become stable and they become this other thing that has the same number of spheres in it, right? And I am sure that if it wasn't for whoever was the person who made the deal, I don't know if it was Euclid or Plato or any one of those. Perhaps it was over time, who knows, who cares? But if they hadn't defined the box as normal, as unit of everything, of uniform, of perception and creation, if they hadn't, if we were actually as familiar with the way of the spheres as it is clearly possible, I mean, it's evident from at least my play, and you know, I got to admit it's a bit like Bucky. It seems from a perspective on the outside like, oh wow, it's so amazing what you're doing. I could never. Yeah, you could. Everyone can. It's just no one knows that it is there and how the things go together. Like the level of play we're at actually with this stuff is like really kindergarten, right? And then there's the complicated kindergarten where people take the box stuff and have a computer and make the tensegrity structure where it's all, that's possible, you know, and there's those ways around. But compared to what our body is doing in every given minute of life, second of life, in millions and billions of cells of playing with these shapes, being alive as us, right? There's a large gap of something we can slowly follow along and take, you know, get closer to what is possible, because it is possible as it unfolds, as you were saying. There's no reason to try to unfold the flower. It's just gonna hurt. We need this time for this thing to open on its own pace, right? And there is no one yet who's gonna go say and instruct everyone that there is this other way we could be doing, other than that's where I see, you know, here's something I need to be doing. I need to invite us constantly, every one of us, to just reconsider, like, given your current moment situation, where you are right now, what would this environment look like if it was not conceptualized and pre-planned and preconditioned in squares and cubes, but in triangles, right? From the room to the house, the furniture, the environment, the materials, the papers, the pictures, everything there is. Because while normal is defined as such, it is anything but neutral. And it's not neutral at all. It's not something that is just, you know, because the shape is always present, it's no harm. It actually, I cannot not say this, but it is harmful that our environment is stuck in that box of solid thinking and surfaces and these things that do not fold, where a hexagon cannot create a solid because it's not allowed to play and to breathe and to be. And that is where, you know, I would love if we were able to figure out how to shift even the material artifactual culture within something as the Montessori frame, from here is the side project where we take the newspaper and make the thing and tape it together, to later, that's great that you integrate that at all. You know, I think most Montessori schools won't have a geodesic thinking architect at their hands to introduce these things, right? But how could we make that shift, and how could the kids help in that? Because they are gonna notice right away that this stuff is not without life, but it is life changing. It is transformation happening, and it is something that we can figure out by first watching and looking and grabbing hold of, and then moving and playing and wrapping our minds around as we go, right? So I hope.
Wonderful. Thank you.
yeah.
Great comments, Rupi. Rupali, go ahead.
I don't know if you can hear the band, but there's
No,
a band.
we can't hear the band. So
Okay,
Zoom does a very good
Yeah,
job
he's
of filtering.
performing.
Go ahead.
Great. Shruti, I just want to show you, we have the hexagonal box. There's a small hexagonal box, a large hexagon box. There are so many materials, right, that I couldn't show everything. And I wish I'd started with a hexagon box and not the triangle box. But the whole idea is that you have to let the child think for themselves by giving them the tools. What speaks to you will be different from what speaks to another child. And by giving them all the tools in the classroom, they can create whatever they want, whether it's poetry, whether it's writing, whether it's robotics. Like we have students who are using artificial intelligence to do some of their work. And we have some students who are still working with sticks and brads to create their shapes, right? So it really depends on each child, what appeals to them. And there is so much out there that you give them the tools. I really like what you talked about by allowing children to learn that things can break, but you can build them. For example, when they build these origami things, or they build with triangles, this hexagon box, it has many little triangles inside it. And this is all a box of triangles that they can make, build from. And I've never seen two children make the same large shape with the hexagon box. I've taught for over 20 years now, and I'm always blown away. And they can take these triangles apart, they can put them together, they can move them around, and they have something new. Same thing with these origami things. They can take, these things are fragile, they break, but they can put them together right away. They don't. And when they see that they can build it themselves, like you said, that fragility, the resilience, the children also become resilient in their thinking. In terms of what do the children, like, how can you let them make these materials? I'll tell you one example. I didn't bring it in the adolescent classroom, but they started with Pascal's triangles, and they were just exploring Pascal's triangles. And soon they went into fractals. And we have this big chart of a large triangle with many tiny triangles. And this was all the work that two boys just did all morning. They were just exploring these triangles. And they came to the fractals on their own experiment, like through their own experience. The teacher just kind of had to give them the time and the resources. She had to just tell them Pascal's story, and they were off. You never know what the child will. Sometimes it's the story of the zero, or it's the story of the noun that will take them on a journey and the child can explore. The great thing about Montessori is the child has the time to explore these ideas. Whereas in a traditional setting, you're always going from, what the teacher is doing, what the curriculum demands of you. Where in a Montessori classroom, you have the curriculum. Within that, you have a lot of freedom. So they can get to that curricular goal through one path or through another path. And the path is decided by the child. The teacher just follows the child through that path. I don't know, Strupi, if that answers your question, but clearly this is one way of thinking and one way of doing it. There are, of course, you have your own way that you've developed, and hopefully we can collaborate at some point.
Thank you, Rupali. I want to make one comment about what Strupi said, and then we'll go to Paul and Jeannie. So firstly, Strupi, great comments. Okay, I think, see, there are two things. One is, how do you deliver education to a child? What's the right way of delivering education to the child? The second is, what should be the content of that education? What Montessori has done, and done brilliantly, is to have the right approach towards the child, saying child is an independent being who grow on her own. What you do is that you provide the right environment, you provide the right soil. If there are weeds, you take it out, but the growth comes from the child, inside of the child. And that's what you nurture. Now, that's a very fundamental principle of education, which Montessori just gets. The second thing Montessori gets is which is a consequence of this, is that education is not done at the child. Child is not this passive being where teacher just stands there and throws education ideas at the child. No, it doesn't work like that. It is going, inside out. Now, having said that, Bucky has some things which are truly revolutionary way of looking at fundamental concepts, like geometry, for example. And not all of them. Some of them are incorporated into the Montessori curriculum. The great thing about Montessori curriculum is whatever they get, they actually make sure that the child can work with. My favorite materials, I actually have, the way I met Rupali, I think 26 years ago, was my niece had come to stay with me and she was 3, and I converted my apartment into a Montessori classroom. I built all these materials on my own, okay, along with my niece. And I was teaching her arithmetic, reading, writing. We were making books. So we're doing all of this. Now, of course, all of that was handmade, because all of these materials are expensive because they are designed, 20 kids using it over 20 years. I didn't need that. And I didn't want to spend that kind of money. So I made all of these materials, and making that is actually, you learn a lot while making it. And that's how I met Rupali, because her son was a little bit younger, and he was like my niece's brother. So it's like, she's like family. And that's how we got into this, okay? And really, what we need to do, actually, it is responsibility of the parent. Parent have to take the responsibility of saying, I want to show my child how to be a human being. Traditionally, that was the context. It was actually extended family in which you picked up these things. And you teach everything that you know. Now, the great thing about Bucky is that he has truly unique ideas on geometry, which have not yet gotten into the general culture. So I really look forward to a time where there is a new batch of materials based on it, because it's not just being able to do it ourselves, but being able to come up with a range of things, which without you being there, anybody should be able to use, anybody should be able to teach. So you have to develop the entire teacher's education, and you have to develop the materials at every age. And when that is done for Bucky's ideas in geometry, I think it would be one step higher. But I think when that happens, Montessori education system will embrace that, because that's how it is. But you have to kind of get to that level. We have to be able to break it up so that what do we give for 2-year-olds? What do we give for 3-year-olds? What do we give for 7-year-olds? What do you give for this? And how do they progress? Build up that entire thing which is there, and so there will be like a Bucky shelf added. And then actually, and I think Strupy, you're right about this fundamental power of it. Bucky shelf will become the more popular shelf that everybody wants to use, and it'll keep expanding within the classroom, because that's what that's just because it lives, it's like they will learn more. So thank you so much for the comments. Really appreciate it. I mean, see, this is the great thing about seeing the interconnection of ideas in terms of teaching. How do you help a child grow? Maria Montessori is just a genius. She's gotten some really core ideas which are consistent with Bucky's ideas. So we have to kind of do this integration. And I look forward, and I encourage you, Strupy, to develop these things, and we can work together in whatever way. But really appreciate your comments. Thank you. Next up is going to be Paul, followed by Jeannie. Paul.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I'll stay off video
Yes.
because I'm in a park
Sure.
and limited bandwidth. Okay. Loved it. I of course changed what I'm saying now that I heard you speak, Srikant and Strupy, which is good because there's a book we might have even covered in some 52. I think it's Julie Cameron, and it's called The Artist's Way. And it talks about how to recover creativity, that we're all recovering creatives because of the standard school system killed it. But I'm really, if everyone had a Montessori education, she would never have gotten famous, because that's what Montessori does. But that's what I'm getting at, is my view of the strength of it and relating Strupy and Rupali's great thoughts. The way Rupali talked about it, it was kind of like encouraging creativity with the Apollo 11 example of you've got 6 things you already know some corollary to in your world, and you have to make them something new to save the world. Or you're invited to, and your mind opens. And those are the geometric solids. But Strupy is wanting to, but I'm pointing out that that's a hugely valuable exercise in Bucky's theme of every day, look at something and see what it means to you, the same things. But then Strupy invites us to expand our definition of universe and completely explode it to another paradigm. But maybe what Montessori is teaching, when we asked the other day in Kirby's presentation, how do you make as accessible his ideas? We're training a person's mind so they're able to go kind of fearlessly where Strupy wants them to go. And it almost doesn't matter which you teach first of those geometric paradigms, because you're teaching the joy of exploration and of combining the world differently. So you're going to be able to go from point A to point B, or point B to point A with the Montessori education. And that's what I love about both your presentations. And the people who teach these things this way are themselves inspiring. Unlike the geometry teacher who just thought she was good at it, so went to public, they're inspiring. So the kids are learning that. So Strupy, they're going to grasp your ideas easily. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Rupali?
Yes, thank you, Paul. I think what you really hit upon was the joy of exploration. That's the key in Montessori. You're not teaching the child what to think, you're teaching the child how to think. And that how to think develops when they are exploring, when they're doing things, when they're communicating and talking with each other, working with each other. And so once they understand the world around them that they are in, they can take that reality and use their imagination to go where Strupi is. Now, Strupi, your education has been really unique. Your parents took charge of education, which is what parents should do. Don't leave it to the teachers or decision makers and policy makers to tell you what's right for your child. You know what's right for your child. All parents know that. Shrikant and I started just like that with our children. We started teaching them at home, knowing what we knew. And these children have become good adults. They are able to function relatively well in the world. They are independent adults. And so Bucky's way, if children have to get to that, they really need to understand what exists. And then by these, there are so many more Montessori trained adults now that they were Montessori children once upon a time, and now they are part of the workforce. The other day, when we had an open house, I asked somebody, how did you come to know about Montessori? And they said, well, my coworker is so creative. And so I asked her, where did she go to school? And she said she went to a Montessori school. I want that for my child. And so there are now adults who have been Montessori students. So the more children go to Montessori schools, they become adults, they will make the change. The change will happen. There is that gestation period. I love that phrase by Bucky. Everything has a gestation period. Maria Montessori, this education system is only 150 years old. It's not too long. I mean, think about the traditional system that goes back thousands of years, right? So change will happen, but it takes time.
Excellent. Great point, Paul. I mean, I think it's the heart. The heart is the child becoming an independent explorer, having, if at the end of education, and that happens actually very early, they, with the Montessori system, this way of learning, they get the idea that they are, because they're born with it. You just encourage them. And then there is a stage where they say, okay, now I can explore. And once that is there, then everything else kind of follows from that. Jeannie.
I may be getting away from geometry here, but I'm wondering about, what kind of social skills artifacts like this could be used for. And I know as a kid, me and my sister, we had our little dolls and they were always play acting, different kinds of real life. And, but I didn't go to school until I was 7. So I know you're working with young kids, and I would assume there are dolls that you use. I'm more familiar with the Waldorf system, where they have a lot of puppets, and they work on theater from a very young age for the kids. So I know the two schools are similar, but I don't really know the differences or similarities exactly. And then I wanted to bring up, a very worrisome thing to me is that I feel like a lot of kids, especially boys, are developing identities as cars. I mean, somebody down the street said, I'm the silver car, It's like they really have identities as a car. And I saw my little nephew, you couldn't pry the cars from his hands. I mean, he was a car from, that was the first toy he played with, not dolls or anything like that. And then I wanted to bring up but on the other hand, you need to teach the kid, that things roll and, the mechanics end of these things. I think it is important, how we work with machines and so forth. How do you do that without destroying the integrity of a kid's personality? And then I wanted to just throw in that, if I were in that school and I didn't have dolls, I'd just take those triangles and I'd maybe draw little faces on them. Maybe can you stick something on that you can pull off later, or, or put a little hat on them. I'd make the red triangle family, and I'd set them up in a social situation it would just sort of naturally occur to me. So I'm wondering about those particular things.
Yeah. So social skills, how do social skills develop, right? In the family, child develops a social skill, their social skills by interacting with the people around them, whether it's their siblings, cousins, uncles, aunts, parents, grandparents. They develop their social skills. As they get to school, they develop their social skills within the environment. I'll tell you, this year, we have more students who haven't been in school because of the pandemic than ever before. And this was their first time coming to school. They were in 4th grade, 5th grade, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade. They haven't been to school before. And so how do you integrate them? Because in the pandemic, their situation was even more interesting because they were not out there with their cousins and relatives and friends. They were protected with their parents in their homes. So their social skills were not what they should have been. But because the Montessori system allows children to work independently and with others, I'm doing this myself on my rug. And then there's the invitation, let's have snack together at the snack table. Let's prepare snack together. Let's cut the bananas. Let's make a sandwich. Let's make a smoothie. Let's prepare a meal today. We are going to bake bread, right? All of these skills teach children to communicate and work with each other. I'm going to bake bread. Hey, I'm not going to eat this entire loaf. Let's all share this. Let's take it to the other classroom. You're actually building real skills. I think about identity. It's really important that children know who they are. And I have heard, like I have a student who says, I'm a wolf. And the teachers actually take that information. They read books about wolves. They read books about people. They read books about great people. They do enactments. For Halloween, children dress up as a character from history. So they do that. For art, we actually have a puppeteer who works. And then for role modeling, the teachers have puppets in the classroom. They're sock puppets. And the puppets talk to each other. And so they role model using puppets. So there are so many different ways. Now we've come to the end of the school year. The children, older students, upper elementary and middle school students are writing the play for the end of the year. So they take what they've learned through the school year and they create the script with the music director, and then they perform, they build the sets, they paint the sets, and the whole school is involved in this. So there's a lot of, there are avenues for children to develop their interests, their personality, their social skills. The teachers are very aware of what's going on in the classroom. The teachers are observers. They take notes. They take copious notes. They know what the students are saying to each other. They know what, which child is crying, which child is hurt, which child needs a little bit more attention today because the mother's traveling. All of those, nuances of just being human. The teachers know that. And so they truly reach the child. They truly respect the child. And because of that, the child feels safe and they can develop in a very joyful manner, I would say, that they are not, some students who have anxiety, typically you don't see that manifested in a Montessori classroom because they are at peace, because they're doing. Bucky says he's a verb, right? We all are. Our school is called Think, Explore, Create. So the other day, a student said to me, he said, I really like the name of our school. It's Think, Explore, Create. That's what we always do. And I said, well, what about other schools? He said, other schools are named after streets. That's not what I do. So So children get it. Children are always doing. If you look at a classroom, they're not just sitting in one place. They're like ping pong balls going everywhere. And they are busy. They are interacting with each other. They are watching, they're listening, they're looking at the teachers. It's like a process of osmosis, right? They're taking it all in, and then they are manifesting it in their own behavior. So I would say in terms of social skills, Montessori, many parents I hear say, oh, this is not the real world. I want to put my child in a traditional school because I want them to have the experience of a real world. So you want your child to be bullied, or you want your child to face these bad behaviors? Is that truly the real world? Is that the world we want for our children? I don't think so. The world that we want to create is in a Montessori classroom. It is with respect. It starts with respecting yourself and respecting others and the artifacts and the materials and the environment around us. Every classroom has living plants, animals that children have to care for. They actually sweep the floors, they roll the rugs, they wash the tables, they clean the chairs. At the end of the day, the classroom looks beautiful so that when they come back the following day, it's ready for them. They take ownership in the classroom. And I think what happens is, as adults, we do so much for the children that children then become passive. And if they are passive, then they are not happy. They're not satisfied with themselves. And then you see this misbehavior because they're not doing anything. Somebody is doing the dishes for them, somebody is cooking for them. As I said, my 3.5, 3-year-old grandniece, when she comes to stay with us, she helps us set the table. She helps sort the spoons from the forks from the dishwasher. She'll help us water the plants in the house. She'll peel the carrots for a salad. So when you give the child something to do, they will break away from things that they cling on to because there's something for them to do. Then they are part of the family. Then they're part of the community they're in. And that's how really social skills or even culture develops in that manner, because culture is nothing but what we do with children day in and day out, whether it be it at home or at school or in the community that we live in.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. All right. Rupali, you wanted to show a video at the end?
Yeah. I just want to show, like, this is a video that Google put together from some of the pictures we had. And it just kind of highlights what learning looks like in our school. It just captures different moments for one child in the school and what his learning looks like. So I just want to share that video. I just want to make sure I have the right screen. Okay, here we are. And that's
Okay. So Rupali, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for presenting. And I know that you kind of only got to show only some things. But anytime you want to present on Montessori and Bucky, because there is just so much, I'm particularly interested in seeing what they said about each other, because that will be interesting. It will be really fascinating to see how Bucky sees Montessori and how Montessori sees Bucky. And I know that you have some colleagues who have spent a lot of time working on it. So would love to have you back.
Sure.
Any closing thoughts?
I just think that, both Maria Montessori and Buckminster Fuller, they believe that thinking is really the first thing that we have to start with. Teaching children how to think is so crucial. And for education systems that allow children to think, I think those are the ones we want to have for our students. The second thing I would just say is both Maria Montessori and Buckminster Fuller did a phenomenal job of creating systems, whether it's education or building, that can be applied anywhere by anyone. The only reason we have a classroom is because we have to teach many, many, many students. But all of this can be done very easily at home. So anyone who wants to teach their children at home, you can do it. You don't need to buy these fancy, expensive materials. You can make them yourself, and you can see the joy of learning. So with that, thank you very much all for joining us.
All right. So thank you very much, folks. So firstly, there are a couple of announcements. We have moved all the meetups from 9 p.m. to 8 p.m. So it's going to be 8 p.m. Sundays for Bucky. Next is going to be Kurt. After that, we're going to have, let me just give you the dates. Sorry about this. So on 21st, we're going to have Kurt. On 28th, we have a double header. We have Stroopy at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And then at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to have Pat Ravasio talking about what she learned about the life principles of Bucky when she was writing the book. I think it's called Girl from Spaceship Earth. So she's going to be talking about that. The week after that, on June 4th, we've got Joe Clinton. And Joe Clinton is amazing. He actually worked with Bucky. He worked with CJ on things. So he's going to be talking about synergetics as nature's way of functioning. So it's going to be amazing meetups coming up. So don't miss them. Look forward to seeing you. And thank you very much, everybody. Jeannie, Stroopy, Richard, Paul, thank you very much for your comments. And thanks, Rupali. Bye, everybody. Take care.